everyone, and welcome back to Culture Shock for another week. We have a very special topic about evolution of languages. We have
Carla.
Willie.
Willie, and our very special guest, Monica Rosas. So I'm going to introduce her first. Monica Rosas is a full-time professor and tutor at the BA of Language Education and Cultural Diversity. She holds a BA in Modern Languages and English Teaching from WEP and a MA in Human Development and Education from UPAEP. Certified English, Spanish, and Spanish-English interpreter by the Ibero Puebla, academic lecturer, online facilitator, and national and international speaker. She is currently studying the specialization in teaching Spanish as a foreign language at the UPNA. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you.
She's
Thank
also
you,
a
Renee.
teacher.
Yeah. Of course, that's the most important thing. That should be said there.
So the topic for today will be divided in three parts. The first one is going to be about the origin of languages according to different cultures and mythologies.
Mhm.
So yeah.
And then on the second part, we will talk about some of the first languages. Well, written languages, because no one's really sure of the first language that exists. So, yeah.
And then in the third part, we will discuss about how languages are becoming extinct, because I think that nowadays it's a big problem we are facing, and sometimes we don't give the importance that should be.
Mhm. So that's a very interesting program today.
Yes.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's important guest because Moni knows a lot about this. She has been
Thank
has specialized herself in these kind of topics, and of course, as long as we were investigating about this, we found very interesting facts and information about how the language has been evolving. And let's begin with this.
Well, to begin with this topic, it's been theorized that languages come from a Proto-Language, which is, you can call like the father of,
All languages.
yeah, but it's not something that we can verify.
Mhm.
But
We actually had a class where we learned a little bit more of the English language, where it came from and where it originated, and how we have English the way it is today. So, yeah, I think this would help us a little bit more.
Yeah, I remember that in some classes of linguistics, we were discussing about how languages started, and as I remember, a teacher told me, we don't know because there is no exactly information that is going to tell you, okay, it started over there or in this way. There's not exactly information about it. But as I know, and I think we all know about this, we saw something that, and in fact, I didn't know about it, the Proto-Language. Proto-Language, and I like to call it like the mother of all the languages,
Okay.
because Proto-Language, of the languages that we know nowadays, and others that extinct that doesn't exist nowadays, everything started from the Proto-Language. It was like the universal language. So, first, Moni, let us know what do you think about this
Okay.
and your opinion about how the languages started.
Okay. You all already mentioned about proto-language, and yeah, you're right, like that is supposed to be like the beginning of language. But the point here with proto-language is that like nobody knows exactly how it looks like or if it actually existed. And I think that's the main like difficulty or the main problem with language, like especially in our area, because it's not like I don't know, like with another person, let's say a historian that knows something about it, then he can go and check and maybe he finds something that can tell him that that happened. No, like our field, like linguistics, it's more like anthropology, I would say. Like we know it happened, but when you go there, like everything is destroyed. And then you just have to figure out what happened. And that is exactly the origin of proto-language. Like proto-language was just there, like thrown around. And like nobody knew exactly if that happened, what happened, where it came from. Nothing. So what linguists did was just to try to discover how to organize all these little particles together and decide that it was the beginning of language. But as Vianney mentioned, it is impossible to know if it really happened that way, because in the end of everything, like, it's just like in the imagination or in the idea of somebody like this, somebody who decided that it was a proto-language or it was just the beginning of everything. In fact, like, you have like this proto-language as the beginning, but we have like proto-language from like the main families, like the main language families. So you might have an Indo-European proto-language, you might find probably Germanic or Slavic or Romances, etc. proto-language. But it's just what people thought it was just the beginning of everything, let's say. So yeah, it would be like the mom, let's say, or the father, like the parents of our languages, but in the end we don't really know if they actually look like that. So it's just pretty interesting. I think that's probably one of the main like areas that are so interesting in our field, because then we have to decide, and we have to also theorize what we actually believed and what we can actually say it's true or not, because nothing is written. And many linguists say we cannot even say if there is an origin of language or not.
Okay.
That's kind of frustrating for me. I would like to know if there was an origin, like physical evidence, but we can't know.
No, and that's the point, because even though we have like physical evidence, let's say in hieroglyphics or stuff like that,
Stones or something.
but that doesn't mean that language wasn't spoken before that. Because in fact, like, there are many languages that are spoken, but they don't have any written. They don't have any written register. So how can you tell?
Yeah, I was reading that a lot of people believe that when the first like human species started to evolve here on Earth, it's when we had our first language, but no one's really sure because they were all spoken and there wasn't any written evidence. So yeah, it's frustrating, and as like linguists, you have to like fix or try to put like this puzzle, and you have to get information from here, and like try to have at least an idea of where like some certain languages come from, but we don't really know, and I mean, it's difficult, right?
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
because we can say we are studying this field, and scientifically we can say that, of course, the beginning of language could be this proto-language that are like part pieces of how the people spoke before, but also it depends on the mythology, because all the cultures that exist, they don't think that the beginning of language started in the same way. Everyone has a different way of thinking in this, and it's not only in this field, in all the things that exist nowadays, but also in language there are a lot of mythology in American, in the others continents.
Well, you have a good point, but I think that before we actually like start speaking about that, I think that it's really important to define what we think language is. Because from that, I think that all those mythologies that, to be honest with you, I'm not that familiar with, so you will have to tell me about them. They just come from that origin because of what they thought about language. And language in the end, it's always identity. And that's the reason that we have like many different beliefs or origins from language depending on the culture, because we all believe we come from different places, and we all believe that we have different origins, like by ourselves, like even by, I don't know, like how we were brought to the earth, or if we were created, or if we evolved, or what happened, no?
Yeah.
So I think that like the first important thing is just to define that language, like to talk about this proto-language, it would be something more structured. Because yes, gestures or sounds or things like those, they existed before even proto-language started. But the proto-language gives you like this structure that makes a language. Even though it's not that complex, even though it doesn't have like all the semantics, grammar, etc., that would be the origin, let's say. So if you start thinking, let's say, about the origins of language, then let's think about the origins of language with the structure, with the grammar, with the form that now we know we are talking about. Then you have all those mythologies that you are describing. But it's also interesting to think what language they are describing. Because maybe they have different forms, but they are even speaking about a different language.
right? Because also it's depend on their religion, as we can say. So, yep, it's depending on a lot of things. But as we were discussing, everything has to come from just one thing, but also depending the context and the culture is how we can give that meaning.
Okay, so tell me about the legends. Which
Well,
ones do you know?
The majority of them has in common has this topic of certain god or this catastrophe that created languages around the world. And I think the most known is the Tower of Babel, which is from the Hebrew Bible, which basically says that humans spoke one language. Everyone spoke one language and they communicated very well. But then they wanted to go beyond that, so they wanted to create a tower to reach God and the heaven. So God got mad because of their arrogance, and what he did was like a punishment to them. He punished humans, and everyone started talking in different languages, so they couldn't communicate between each other.
Yeah. There were a lot of misunderstandings, I think. So.
And that illustrates what we were saying. Language is power.
Yeah.
So if they couldn't communicate and they couldn't understand each other, then they just could never reach God.
Yeah. Interesting.
Another one says, this is from the Aztecs, that one man and his wife were the only survivors from a flood. They spoke the same language, obviously, but then they had children, and then I don't know the name of their god, but their god sent a dove, which gave the kids the ability to speak, but each of the kids spoke a different language, so they couldn't talk between them either.
Yeah, there's another one about ancient Greece with the gods and things like that. Is similar to the first one that Carla said, when they all spoke one language and then people brought another one and then created chaos and destruction. So yeah. And
also in Norse mythology, which I really like, says that the third son of Be, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but Be, which is, I think he's the brother of Odin, was the one who gave humans the ability to speak.
Okay. Well, they are pretty interesting, but if you think about it carefully, none of them explains how people actually started speaking.
Yeah.
Then, because
It's
then
more
if
like
the
a myth. Right.
Because then these people they had kids, and then the kids started talking. But before the kids talk, they were already talking. Like they already spoke a language. So that's the issue. Like nobody knows. So we just take for granted that people speak. But how do we speak? Like how did we learn? How did we pass from non-speaking people or like beings, whatever we were, this Homo sapiens, Homo blah blah blah. Like how did we go from that to structured language to be able to call it also a proto-language? Like how? That's the question. Have you ever thought about it?
no.
My teacher spirit is coming out.
It's interesting because as you're mentioning, I don't know if it's good or not. Like taking this mythology and scientifically talking in the major, talking like scientifically with this and what we are learning. I don't know if it's good or it's not good because this is it's more like a myth that it's more than something that is true. So what do you think about it?
I do have a theory, but I don't know if we have time to talk about it before we just got to this break. But what I believe is that language happened because of evolution. So in this moment when I don't remember the Homo something, before the Homo sapiens there was this other one that I always forget its name, but this one that both species they just met. No, they work together. So one of them dies. I don't remember what the name of that species was. Let's check it in a moment. And then we have this brain evolution where we do have something in our brains, as Chomsky says. No, we do have this little device. We have the Broca area that those animals didn't have before. So I'm gonna call them animals because of that reason now. So now, starting from there, like our brain evolved, and then it became so complex that we actually had the possibility to think about more complex stuff than animals did. So what happened then was that we needed to communicate everything that was going on in our brains, and then language begins. And it has to begin in that way because we have to call things, we have to name things, but we also have to name what we feel, which is something that sometimes, well, I think animals don't do. I'm not saying they don't feel, but they don't express what they feel and how they feel. And human beings, we do that.
Right.
And I think that's the difference between animals and
Humans.
and humans. And I think that's the reason, like the very core reason of the origin of language. We need to express what we are, where we come from, etc., etc. That's my
Good
theory.
Makes sense.
That's my theory.
And it makes sense, as you said.
Now think about it, and then you tell me your theories and what you think about also what I have just said.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we will be back. We will go on break, and we will continue to talk about this topic.
Okay.
Soy de Yotosco Guerrero, Puebla. Estoy en el 9º semestre de fisioterapia en UPAEP y he encontrado mi vocación. Recordar mi infancia es recordar una época de mucho esfuerzo. Me gusta mucho ayudar a la gente y por eso fui voluntario en la Cruz Roja de Huitamalco, Puebla. En bachillerato hice servicio social en una unidad básica de rehabilitación, lo cual me convenció de que fisioterapia era lo que realmente quería estudiar. Estoy becado gracias al programa Una apuesta de futuro de UPAEP, en donde desarrollamos el proyecto social Jóvenes en Acción por Ayotosco, que tiene como objetivo hacer mejoras para la comunidad. Desde mi área de estudio hicimos un manual para que los pacientes continúen su tratamiento desde casa, aun cuando no puedan asistir a consulta. El próximo semestre me iré de intercambio a España. Es otro sueño cumplido y una apuesta de futuro y UPAEP me han dado esta gran oportunidad. Para mí, ser UPAEP es romper tus paradigmas y aprovechar cada oportunidad que se presenta para ayudar a los que más te necesitan. Esta es mi vocación. Soy Ernesto y soy UPAEP.
Okay, so we're back. Surprise, surprise. I'm here.
Thank you for coming, Alan.
Alan's back. Right? So I was listening to the show out there, right? And well, we're talking about the different origin of language theories, right? We already talked about the mythology, yes, and how different civilizations try to explain the origin of language. Even the Bible tries to do so, right? So I also listened to Monica's own theory, right? And what she believes in. Well, I just, I don't know what to believe in because there's so many theories, but I especially like proposals from the critical period one, which has to do with the device, that we have a device to learn. But as Willie was commenting, there's this isolated cases, right? Very specific, in which children have been abandoned or haven't had contact with people. And if they haven't spoken or interacted with speakers of any language, there's no chance, there's no possibility of them of learning how to speak. Right? I remember this case of this guy that was found in, I don't remember where, but he was taken to France, and all these linguists tried to teach him how to speak, and the only thing he could learn how to say was lait, right, which is milk, French for milk. He could never really learn how to speak. He could communicate like in a very basic level, like with signs or moving things, blocks, like Lego things. But he was never really able to speak. So that supports the theory of the critical period, but there's no like super good evidence of that. That's one thing I like. I think interaction in your early years is what makes even in the phonetic level, right? Like you start discriminating sounds, right, and then you start to mold your phonic system to produce those sounds. At the beginning, any child is said that they can produce any sound, they can reproduce any sound because their phonic system is just open to that. And through time, as time passes, then we just fossilize the sounds that we use in our language. I also like the onomatopoeia theory, right, in which just people back then started copying sounds around them, and depending on the regions they live, they give different interpretations to those sounds. And it's very interesting to analyze, just for example, the sounds of animals, right, in different languages. Like in Spanish, we say wow, wow for a dog, and English is woof, woof, right? And the rooster, that's one of my favorites. The rooster in Spanish is kikiriki, right? And English is cucuruldoo. And French is cocorico, right? And so it's just different interpretations of people trying to assign these sounds around them, just make sense out of them, right? How do we do what's the sound when a door closes, right? What is the sound when we clap? And all these things. And I think it's a combination of might have been, that's my, if I have to choose one, it's a combination of these bits of different theories. Like, of course, I think that we try to imitate our surroundings, but of course, I also think that we have a chip inside because it's so complex to speak languages, right? And yeah, that would be my opinion.
What about you guys?
I don't have one, I think.
No?
Yeah, I didn't really think about this before. It was just like I was born, I have the ability to speak, and that's it. I just never thought about it until I started studying languages. In one of our linguistics class, we actually saw a case of a young girl named Jeannie who, as Alan was saying, the critical period where she was isolated from contact with any person, and she was like, I think locked in her basement or something like that. And she was like 7, or I forgot like what age she was when they discovered her, and it was too late. Like she couldn't talk to anyone. So yeah.
I think, and as you mentioned, Moni, because I liked all these theories that you're saying, because I think everything is about evolution. And as Alan said, I think we have that device so we can talk. We have those skills to develop and to say something in order to communicate. But also, I think that if we don't have that context, if we don't have someone to talk to, so it's impossible to communicate and to say something. Just in that case of that girl. And as long as we, for example, if we grow up and we haven't talked with someone, it's gonna be more difficult for that person to communicate something, because that device or the critical period has been not developed in a good way. So I think that's how we can develop this.
Starting like this week, I've been talking a lot about this topic with the girls from language acquisition class, because we are at the end of the semester. So they have like these subjects that they are analyzing and they are like observing, etc., etc. And yeah, I think that it's impossible to say that we don't have this language acquisition device, or we don't have like these other aspects. I think that the very important thing is just to think that, yeah, language, we use language for communication, that's for sure. And since language is used for communication, like if you are just isolated or alone, you don't have to communicate anything. And what would be interesting is to know if those people were actually thinking about anything. Were they? Or they were just in blank?
Yeah.
Because that's the point, like that's the most important and interesting thing, I think, because in that way probably they were not even, they didn't need anything. I mean, I'm not saying they didn't need to eat or something. I don't even know if they had something to eat, but they just couldn't ask for anything. They couldn't say anyone, I love you, or I need this, or I want that, or blah, blah, blah.
It was just a primary need of satisfy, right?
So that's the reason that I think that the origin of language has to do with communication. And yeah, that's right. Like, I think that this theory about the critical periods and everything, it has to do more with like the evolution of our brain, let's say, and the like this transformation or the growth, let's say, that we give, and that's the reason that we can actually like make more things and think in abstract forms and probably say something that is more complex. But in order to do that, we need contact. We need contact. Like
Yeah.
it's impossible for us, I think, to do those processes if we are not in contact with anyone. Like in this moment, I think that for all of us, it would be impossible almost impossible. That's why we have like these meditation things and everything. But it's almost impossible just to stay sitting and think of nothing.
Yeah.
Can you do that? I don't think so.
No.
And it's really hard
Yeah.
because all the time we are in language. So I don't know, probably these people, that's the reason they just didn't even need to say anything or do anything with language. And yeah, what you said, like maybe they could only acquire those little words or those little sounds because, yeah, the period where they were open to all these sounds and to acquiring all these different forms has finished. Even nowadays, like if I try to learn French, for me it's impossible to pronounce it, and it's just because I never learned how to do those sounds, and
Yes.
now I cannot do them. Like babies at the beginning, they
It's
are
fossilized, right?
yeah. I think that it's not really fossilized, but it's that I just acquire, as people say, like I just acquired the sounds that I needed for my communication in a daily basis.
Yeah.
I didn't need those R's or blah things. So my brain says, why do you need them? Like, let's not do that. Like, let's focus on this.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Another interesting thing, going back to evolution, is that at some point in evolution, when the primates started like standing up, and then they become these Homo habilis and Homo whatever, right? When we stood up, when finally we are able to stand up straight, there was a very important, crucial thing in evolution, which is that animals can't choke. A monkey cannot choke if it's eating, right? But once we stood up, we did this division in our throats, and then we evolved our phonic system inside our vocal cords and everything in such a way that now we could have the ability of producing certain sounds that animal couldn't, but we could choke. That was like the price we had to pay, and of course with
Because we
these
think and speak.
yeah, and with these more interaction with, among the members of these groups, and then it's when it comes into play, right? This interaction, this necessity for communicating. The bigger the group, the more needs they had, right?
And the more complex the thoughts, because I really believe
Yes.
that. Like, it doesn't mean that animals don't communicate. They communicate.
Yes.
And they can warn if there is danger. They can say if there is food or whatever. But, like, people, we just go beyond that. And that's the reason we need communication in language, in
And-
that form of structure.
And it's really interesting field of research because why are we discussing this? What happened with this girl that was isolated? So it was something illegal, of course. So why are
Yeah.
we discussing this? Because long time ago, some years ago, there is no way to figure out what happened if a person is isolated and that person doesn't talk with someone for a lot of years. So what happened with that person? So why can we talk about this? Because unfortunately, there are some cases like this, and so there are scientists that can start a research about it. So I think it's really interesting.
It proves that everything that we have studied has a sense and it has a reason, no? Like those terrible cases like gives us the panorama that we need to know that, yeah, we need to have a society, like language is society. Language is like, it's always part of something bigger, and that's the reason that when we learn a language, we always have like these people helping us and just trying to make this scaffolding process, like telling us how to pronounce this, how we don't say this. Like if I say I don't know, poni en vez de puso or whatever, like people are always telling you, and I think that's the context, no? That's the part of society that makes us also like live in society, think in society, but also be like, as I told you, like very complex beings.
And what is beautiful about human language is that it differs from animal communication a lot, right? I was reading this paper on language in general and communication, and it was that if a human, like let's say in the old times, right, like you know the word for snake, and then you know the word for feathers and for birds, and if you saw a feathered snake, just like one of the old gods here, right, in this region, they would call it a feathered snake. They would create a new word for that, even if it didn't exist before. We have that creativity part in our language that has, of course, been part of this infinite interaction and evolution throughout the years. And if a bees have these ways of like dancing, right, of communicating, and the ones who have to look for the honey, they know how to communicate where the honey is, and that's where the hive will go, right? But they did an experiment in which they would take them to the top of one of the tallest buildings there. I think it was in San Francisco, and they show them a lot of honey, right? So they show them like, look, here is the honey, and then go back and tell them where the honey is. They could go back to their hives, but then it was interesting to see these bees just dancing like crazy. They didn't know how to explain, and because of this, it's deduced that there's no sign or there's no way of them to communicate what is like going to the top of something. So they don't, their language or their way of communicating is restricted, and they don't have the possibility to create that or to explain that, and they would just go insanely like and dancing and trying to say where the honey was, and the hive could never find it. So I think that's very interesting, and what differs human language from other kinds of communication.
Creativity in
Yes,
the end.
this
It's just
creativity.
creativity because
Yes.
we have so many things to say, and you need to find a way to say all those things.
Yes.
Yeah,
In
I think that's
In terms of language, we never stop learning something. In fact, every day we are saying some words that we didn't never know before, and we are we are looking some words, and we are giving meanings to everything,
Yeah.
and we never stop learning, and that happens in every language. So.
Yeah, and that gives credibility to Chomsky and his device.
Yes, and that's why when someone tells me like, oh, I know how to speak English like at 80%, but it's kind of difficult to speak. I just don't. For me, that discredits that person, right?
Well, I think that everybody discredits himself when he says something like that.
Yeah,
It's just like, are you sure? Can you
we don't
count?
even speak 100% of Spanish. There's always something.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
I
right.
always, when we receive like these CVs exactly saying I speak 100% this or so, blah, 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 like in my CV, I have never been able to put that I speak English. It's just like I speak English, but I don't know how well I speak English. I speak Spanish, but I don't think I speak really good Spanish.
Yes.
Or how I express
That's
myself.
why these people in our area should be like, I have an B1 level in this language of proficiency.
But I don't
right?
even know what that means anymore because
And we are inventing more and more words every day. One day I did this like kind of experiment. I was looking for some words with A, B, and C in Spanish, and I put it in my computer, and like, I don't know, like 60%, 70%, I only know these 60-70% of words. The rest, I didn't know what was the meaning of those words. So it's impossible to know like 100% of a language, even our own language. So
yeah, it's impossible. It's impossible.
Any
But-
final comments before we go to the break?
But we can create them. We can create
Yes.
words,
Right.
and we create words because we are constantly creating word things.
and meanings.
That's the difference.
Just like in English, the word hashtag, where did it come from? Like, what is a hash? I know tag, but how did it become hashtag? And then it became so, which by the way was used by a lot of users of Twitter, but and they demanded from the creators of Twitter to make it a thing, right? And it was so popular that they ended up coming up with that.
And why does that symbol exist anyway? Like, I don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah, I remember looking at that symbol in the telephone, like in the big telephones, and thinking like, why do we need it? And I remember, well, in Spanish it's called gato, no?
It
So
is
I
to
was,
play gato,
yeah,
right?
and I was all the time asking my mom like, when can I press the gato key? And she was like, no, you don't really use it. And I was like, okay, cool. So why don't we have it there, no?
Well, we're gonna go to a break, and when we come back, we'll show you the Vox Populi.
llamo Gregorio y soy 100% familia UPAEP. No solo porque aquí estudié mi licenciatura y maestría, sino porque la experiencia de ser UPAEP marcó mi vida. Disfruto los deportes extremos, toco la guitarra y me gusta mucho leer, en especial temas de astronomía y política. Uno de mis más grandes hobbies es el tenis de mesa. Fui seleccionado estatal y parte del equipo representativo de la uni. Mi deseo de conocer el mundo es algo que UPAEP sembró en mí desde el primer momento. Ejemplo de ello son los veranos que trabajé en Walt Disney World y Summer Camps durante la licenciatura, y después mi doble grado en la maestría en la Universidad Federal de los Urales en Rusia, el cual fue todo un reto. Y sobre todo, me hizo crecer en el ámbito personal y profesional. Soy miembro de Rotary en el Club Rotaract Puebla Colonial, donde emprendemos proyectos a favor de la comunidad local menos favorecida. Actualmente trabajo en una empresa francesa de clase mundial, donde vivo el liderazgo UPAEP día a día, siendo fuente de motivación e inspiración para mis compañeros. Para mí, ser UPAEP significa ser un profesionista capaz de generar cambios sociales, utilizando la combinación de excelencia académica y sentido humanista. Todo eso soy yo. Soy Greg y soy UPAEP.
Escúchanos todos los miércoles de 3 a 4 de la tarde por Puebla FM. UPAEP presenta.
Hoy hablaremos sobre el origen de los idiomas. Vamos a verlo.
Hola, ¿cuál creen que fue el primer idioma en existir?
¿El latín?
El latín, igual. Sí, latín.
¿Por qué creen que los idiomas mueren?
Pues por la falta de cultura que se va perdiendo.
Siento que es porque todo va evolucionando y hay ciertas palabras que pues ya no se empiezan a usar o se modifica para tener un significado como nuevo y más sencillo. Yo creo que por eso.
¿Qué idioma les gustaría aprender y por qué?
Yo alemán, porque tengo alguna amiga alemana y me gustaría aprenderlo.
Chino o japonés, porque pues es como en mi carrera siento que es muy importante a nivel global, porque pues el inglés ya es básico y lo que está dominando ahorita es Japón, China, todos esos países son los que están dominando ahorita el mercado.
Ok, gracias.
Hola, ¿cuál crees que fue el primer idioma en existir?
No sé, yo creo que fue como el chino o el inglés.
¿Sabes de algún idioma que ya haya desaparecido?
No, la verdad desconozco cuál haya desaparecido.
¿Crees que podría surgir algún nuevo idioma?
No creo, la verdad.
¿Por qué?
Pues no sé, para que exista pues otro idioma yo creo que debería como, no sé, crear nuevas culturas o algo por el estilo, entonces pues no creo que se pueda existir.
Gracias.
Hola, ¿cuál creen que fue el primer idioma en existir?
Pues para mí es el latín. Yo creo que fue el hebreo.
¿Por qué creen que los idiomas mueren?
Por la evolución, como todo tiene que llegar a su... como todo tiene su inicio, tiene su fin, entonces por medio de la evolución creo que se acaban los idiomas y todo eso.
Yo por la globalización, nos tenemos que adaptar a un solo idioma y se dejan atrás algunas lenguas y así.
¿Qué idioma les gustaría aprender y por qué?
Me gustaría aprender el italiano y pues el inglés porque pues es básico para todo y el italiano porque se me hace una lengua muy bonita.
Yo el francés porque se me hace muy romántica.
Ok, gracias.
Hola, ¿cuál crees que fue el primer idioma en existir?
A lo mejor fue el chino, quizás.
¿Sabes de alguna lengua que haya desaparecido?
Sí han desaparecido, pero no sabría ninguna en específico.
¿Crees que se puede crear algún nuevo idioma?
Sí, la verdad que sí.
¿Por qué?
Creo que las culturas van avanzando siempre y siempre se van creando cosas nuevas. No sabemos si en un futuro llega a haber una cultura nueva con un nuevo idioma.
Gracias.
Okay, and we're back. So lots of interesting things. I think the ones that go closest, although it's for a difference of thousands of years, it's the people who said Chinese was the first language, right? It's not correct,
Chinese
but
is
it's
really ancient.
from the ones mentioned. From the ones mentioned, it's the oldest, right?
Oldest, yeah.
And one interesting thing here is that humans in our search to try to find out everything, we've always categorized these languages. For example, we have the Latin family, right, which is French, Portuguese, Spanish, Italian,
Romans.
and
Spanish.
no, there's a fifth one. I think I've said it in the show in the past. You don't remember the fifth Romance language?
I have to accept that I didn't pay a lot of attention to
So
the language.
we have 5 Romance languages. Yeah, we have
Spanish?
Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, French, and no idea.
I forgot.
Romanian.
Yes. That's
and
true.
I found out this when I was in high school. I was like googling something, and then this weird web page came out. There was a flag. I didn't recognize the colors, and I could understand a lot of it. I knew it was in Portuguese. It wasn't any of that, and I was like, "What is that?" And then I found out it was a Romanian web page. I don't know why I didn't open that, but I could understand a lot of what was like small bits, right, or words, isolated words. I could understand. I was very curious, and then I found out that Romanian is the fifth Romance language, and that's why we have that. And there we have other families like the Germanic one, in which German and English are.
The Scandinavian.
Yes. Scandinavian, yes, where all these Nordic languages are, right? And it's very interesting. I think I also commented that the UR, the particle U and R, are shared by Norwegian and Danish, which is du er, right? And if you want to say pretty, that's the word that changes in both languages, right? In one of them is bakker, and in the other one is schmuck. But the UR bit is very, very similar. Just like in French, right? Tu es, right? This is the same. Tu eres. It's very, very similar to that. And it's just very interesting to see how these languages are related and how they have evolved and how they have become different languages, but at the same time sharing all these things.
Yeah. Any more comments? I really like the comment where the girl said, why do you think or why do languages die? And she says, just like everything, it has a beginning and an end.
Yeah.
Very interesting answer, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, for certain languages, it's just that people are just not interested to like continue learning, speaking, or they're ashamed of it. For example, here, as I mentioned, I think before, indigenous languages where people don't want to speak it because they don't want to be discriminated, so they just decide not to learn it anymore, not to teach it to their children, and little by little, these languages start to die out. So.
Or just like in the research you guys did, I was reading, and it was very interesting to see that is part of the social acceptance of such languages, right? But also because there's a minority that might speak a certain language, and they think their children will have more opportunities, or the economical factor comes into play, right? They think that if they teach another the language of the majority in the surroundings, they will succeed. They will have more chances of success in the society, and they will have better opportunities. And that's another reason, which I consider now very logical. But we sometimes just tend to say like, it's because they are ashamed. But there's the economical factor there, right? Which happened a lot in the States. How many children of immigrants they have, and they don't speak the language,
They don't
right?
speak. I have cousins who don't speak Spanish at all. And I asked them, why don't you speak Spanish? And then they're like, no, because it's not my language.
Yeah.
Because their parents taught them that since they live in the States, it's their country, they should learn the language, even though the States doesn't really have an official language, but yeah, so they grow up with this idea that for them Spanish isn't really useful.
And in the past, you could understand, right? Like, well, way in the past, you could understand all this discrimination against Mexicans, which still exists, but now is not more, it's not socially accepted anymore, and now it's just weird. If families keep on doing it, I just think it's weird. In the past, I could probably find a justification for that, but now it just doesn't make any sense. You will be giving your children more opportunities the more languages they speak, but still, it happens. It's still happening nowadays, right? And other thing is the difference, right? Like you were talking about that when everything comes to an end. The difference between, do you remember the difference between an extinct language and a dead language, right? Can you please explain the differences?
Well, I saw something about the language attrition.
Yeah.
It's language attrition. That is basically the process in which the language is becoming extinct. So it's not like the extinction itself, but it's the process. So I think that it's what is happening with some indigenous languages and also with other languages around the world, that unfortunately they have only like 3 or 4 native speakers, and that's it. And when they die, they're not going to be speakers of that language anymore. So I think that language attrition, it's an important part of this language extinction. What do you think about it?
Well, I was just listening to what Alan was saying and what Vianney was also telling us. And, well, I think that reasons why languages become extinct or probably are, I don't know, probably they just start having less people speaking them. It's not only because of discrimination, because we usually tend to, like, blame the others. Side, yeah. We usually blame the others for what happens, no? But then what happens with ourselves? Like, if I actually wanted to speak, like if these kids wanted to really wanted to speak Spanish, then I think that they would have asked their parents, no? But they just don't do that anymore because they don't feel the need. Yeah. They don't feel the need, and it is not really part of their identity. It is not part of who they are. So why do they need it? No, like English. It's probably one of those languages that we learn a lot because, like, it gives you the possibility to speak with many people around the world, and that's the reason that I think that many American people, they just don't want to learn any other language. Yes. But it's because they know the other people want to learn English, and they know that they will be able to communicate. So it's also part of who they are. Like, I don't need it because I speak like this powerful language that will give me the possibility to communicate with everybody else, even though I don't make any effort. So I think that's mainly the reason. Like, I think that it's mainly power, what is the important role here, no? What is important word here?
It's everything in the world.
As everything in the world, yeah. Like, why, for example, some languages became extinct here in Mexico or even in the States, no? Because of those invasions. Like, they were conquered, so the powerful one, they just impose their language, and then the others have to adopt. And they have to adapt to that form of thinking. And they do that, and they actually also start, like, just leaving away all the other stuff, like all the other things that make them part of that culture. So probably these kids who don't want to speak Spanish anymore, it's because they don't even have, like, this grasp or sense of what being Mexican is. So why do I want to speak a language that is not my language? Yeah, like, my culture is different, my ideas are different, I don't need it. And maybe, we believe, because, and I also believe the same thing that Alan was saying, but I don't know, like, if my point was for my family and my kids and everyone in there to live in the States and just probably, like, become successful or whatever, I don't want them to go back to Mexico, let's say. I'm just passing them that idea, so why should they speak Spanish? Why? I think it's not because it doesn't make sense. I think that it's actually because it makes sense that they just do it. But they do that because of their perspective of life.
Yeah, I think it has to be with the famous lingua franca. Because the lingua franca, it's like the most spoken languages in the world. Nowadays it's English. That's the reason that like us and other people, we are learning that language. I think in the past, French and also Spanish is becoming a lingua franca, and it's because these languages are part of the government, are part of business, are part of everything in the world. So that's the reason that people that become from a minority, they want to start speaking in these languages that are spoken the most for this reason. So I think that
so
that's
you can
important
have
part.
access to power in
Right.
the end.
And more education and
More opportunities.
more success. So yeah, there are two.
Education.
Yeah, nowadays almost everything in every single area of knowledge is being printed first in English, right? Even if the author doesn't speak English, right? That's the way it's working now. And if you want to access the newest information, you have to do it in English, or wait a few years until you have the translation, right? And
If you want your paper or your information to be known and to become famous, you write in English. I was reading this article last week, and it says that we need to start giving like our mother tongues, like people who don't speak English, like Spanish or German or whatever. Like we need to start giving them the credibility and the academic status that they are supposed to have. So you write your paper in English and you also write it in Spanish, because then you have to start like pushing again those languages so they become academic and they become respected in society again. Because little by little, the truth is that we just go to English and we just believe that probably the others are not that important anymore.
It's sad, but it's true, because I have a friend who plays in a band, and they were writing the lyrics for their songs, and their bandmates wrote them on English, and he was kind of mad because he was why can't we write it in Spanish? It's a beautiful language. And I say because that's how we are going to reach other people, not only in Mexico. So.
interesting you mentioned that, because a lot of singers have become popular until they have sung in English, right? Like let's say Shakira. That's a big example. She was very famous here in Latin America, Mexico and so on. But until she started singing in English, that's when she became
famous.
Worldwide famous, and that's what many people do.
I have a question for you guys. I was once asked if I thought that English would become a universal language. Do you guys think that?
No.
No? It's just...
I believe a variation of English might become in the future. I've seen it in the airports, and it's very interesting. People who don't speak a word of any language, they just know, because we're so much in touch with English, there's this, if you really pay attention to your surroundings, there's so many words that are in English and you don't even know. Yes, exactly, right? And I've seen these old people in the airport who cannot really communicate, but they still have these interactions, which could evolve, and I'm pretty sure they could. It's just like, where from? Yes, Norway, right? And it's like, where to? United States. Business? Tourism, or tourist, right? Something like that. And they say, business. 5 days? No, 2 weeks. And it's just this very basic communication, which I think the barbaric part of English helps this, right? Like I was telling my students, it's so easy. You just have play, add ed, and you have the past. And that's it. And someone who's learning Spanish or French, which is my case, right? You have to learn the ending for I, the ending for you, the ending for he, the ending for they, the ending for us, and that's so much. Yes, and the pronunciation, and it's so much more difficult, right? And it has so many more variations and things there. But yeah.
Maybe in an utopian world where the government will force it on us.
Yeah.
I think we should talk English and other languages because it's part of globalization, and that's what we have nowadays. But it has not to be universal, because I think that takes other things that, for example, culture and a lot of things that I don't think that could be possible.
Well, thank you very much for being here. For this very nice program. Thank you, Monica, for being here with us. Thank you, guys. Your research was excellent. And, thank you all for listening and being here with us another week. We'll be back next week for more Culture Shock, and I hope you write to us, look at our Instagram, which is
Culture shock you are.
Culture shock you are. And yep, thank you very much. We'll be back next week.